Hashtag Alien Girl was used as a living battery until a human hero made the aliens regret it. The recycled air aboard Vesper Station carried the usual blend of machine oil, alien spices, and the unmistakable tang of desperation. Kale adjusted his worn leather jacket, eyes scanning the crowd flowing through the station's central market hub. Neon signs in a dozen languages bathed the scene in their harsh, artificial glow, reflecting off metal surfaces and the occasional glint of a weapon not quite concealed. Vesper was exactly what he remembered, a wayward outpost clinging to existence at the edge of civilized space, where rules existed only as suggestions and morality was as fluid as the bootleg liquor sold in the shadier corners. Perfect for someone trying to disappear for a while. "Watch yourself, off-worlder," growled a four-armed Vespian as they bumped shoulders. The alien's upper set of hands hovered near what looked suspiciously like a disintegrator pistol. Kale met its compound eyes without flinching. "Might take your own advice," he replied, voice level but with an edge that made the Vespian reconsider. After a tense moment, the alien moved on, disappearing into the crowd. He continued toward his destination, a dingy establishment calling itself the Last Port. The bar was known for two things: information and anonymity, both of which Kale needed right now. The door hissed open, releasing a cloud of smoke and the thrumming bass of music playing just loud enough to make eavesdropping difficult. The bartender, a heavy-set human woman with augmented eyes that glowed faintly blue, nodded in recognition. "Been a while, soldier." "Not a soldier anymore, Mira," Kale corrected, sliding onto a stool. "Just passing through," she snorted, pouring him a glass of amber liquid without asking. "Nobody's just passing through Vesper. Everyone's running to or from something." She pushed the drink toward him. "So which is it for you this time?" "Maybe I missed your charming personality," he said, taking a sip. The liquor burned pleasantly down his throat. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion from a nearby table. A thin, trembling Saurian was surrounded by three burly men in matching dark jackets. "Please," the Saurian whispered, "I need more time." The largest man, a scar bisecting his left cheek, leaned in. "Zorian doesn't give extensions. Payments do." Kale watched from the bar, jaw tightening as the man grabbed the Saurian by its fragile neck membrane. The creature's eyes bulged in panic. "Not your business," Mira murmured, seeing his expression. "Never is," Kale agreed, already standing. 3 minutes later, the Saurian was free. The three debt collectors were nursing various injuries, and Kale was being shown the back exit by an annoyed but unsurprised Mira. "You never could mind your own business," she said, but slipped him a data chip. "Take the service tunnels. Quieter route back to the docks." Kale pocketed the chip. "Thanks. I owe you." "Add it to your tab," she replied, shutting the door behind him. The service tunnels were indeed quieter, dimly lit by strips of emergency lighting running along the ceiling. The sounds of the bustling station faded to a distant hum, replaced by the mechanical heartbeat of recyclers and life support systems. Kale moved with practiced quietness, his combat boots hardly making a sound on the metal grating. The route was longer but safer, or should have been. Halfway through, his instincts prickled. Something felt wrong. He slowed, listening past the background drone of machinery. There, a faint sound that didn't belong. A voice? No, more like a whimper. Kale paused at a junction, hesitating. The rational choice was to continue to the docks. Whatever trouble lay down the other path wasn't his concern. He'd had enough of other people's problems. But the sound came again, unmistakably one of pain. With a muttered curse at his own poor judgment, Kale turned toward it. The tunnel opened into what appeared to be an abandoned maintenance bay, hastily repurposed. Packing crates formed makeshift walls, and unfamiliar equipment hummed with power. Kale pressed himself against the shadow of a large conduit, assessing the scene. What he saw made his blood run cold. In the center of the improvised facility was a transparent chamber, shaped like a hexagonal prism. Inside, suspended by cables and electrodes, hung a humanoid figure. No, not just humanoid. She was distinctly female, slender and delicate, with skin that might have been pale blue under better circumstances, but now appeared mottled and dull. What truly marked her as non-human were the crystalline formations that seemed to grow from her skin at various points, shoulders, forearms, along her spine, now dimmed to a sickly opacity. Around the chamber, 3 figures in dark uniforms bearing an unfamiliar insignia monitored equipment. A 4th, taller figure paced before the chamber, occasionally barking orders. Increase energy extraction by 15%, the tall one commanded. His voice carried the natural authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "But Warden Vorg, sir," one technician protested, "she's already showing signs of critical depletion." Another increase might. "Did I ask for your opinion?" The warden's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Director Silas expects the shipment tomorrow. Do you want to explain to him why we're behind schedule?" The technician swallowed visibly and adjusted the controls. Inside the chamber, the crystalline woman's body arched in silent agony. Her eyes, large, almond-shaped, with irises like shattered amethyst, flew open. For a brief moment, her gaze swept the room and, by chance or fate, locked directly with Kale's hidden position. In that instant, something passed between them. Not words, not even thoughts, but a raw, desperate plea that transcended language. Her eyes held such pain, such profound violation, that Kale felt it like a physical blow. Then the moment passed as her eyes fluttered closed, her body once again slumping in its restraints as the machine drained her life force. "The director will be pleased," Warden Vorg said, examining a readout. "This crystalline has yielded more energy than the last 3 combined. We should consider adjusting our procurement criteria to—" Kale withdrew silently, mind racing. The syndicate. It had to be. He'd heard whispers about the criminal organizations expanding operations, but this was beyond mere smuggling or racketeering. This was slavery, torture. As he retreated down the tunnel, Kale's practiced detachment wavered. He'd seen atrocities before, across a dozen worlds during his military service. He'd learned to walk away, to protect his sanity by minding his own affairs. The galaxy was too vast, its cruelties too numerous for one man to fight. But those eyes, that silent scream that seemed to echo in his very bones. Kale reached the end of the service tunnel and paused, his path literally forking before him. Left led to the docks, to his ship, to escape from Vesper Station and whatever trouble was brewing here. Right led back toward the market, where he could gather supplies, information, perhaps even weapons. He stood motionless for a long moment, the memory of those violet eyes burning in his mind. Then, with deliberate steps, he turned right. For the first time in years, Kale felt something break through the cynical shell he'd built around himself, a white-hot spark of rage, and beneath it, something he'd thought long dead. Purpose. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The black market section of Vesper Station operated with the thinly veiled blessing of whatever passed for authority in this lawless corner of space. Shops and stalls sold everything from illegal weaponry to controlled substances to body parts, some still connected to their original owners. Kale moved through the crowd with determined efficiency, gathering what he needed. A compact ion blaster with the serial numbers filed off. Signal scramblers. A multi-tool with military-grade, lock-breaking attachments. Stun grenades. Medical supplies. The vendor, a battle-scarred Tellurian with metal implants where his left I should have been, raised an eyebrow as he calculated the total. "Planning a war, friend?" he asked, voice a mechanical rasp. Kale transferred the credits. "Just some insurance." The Tellurian chuckled, a sound like grinding gears. "Must be some policy." He pushed a small case across the counter. "Throw in some stasis cuffs. Never know when you might need to keep something or someone secured." Kale hesitated, then added the cuffs to his gear. "Any word on syndicate operations in the lower sectors?" The vendor's mechanical eye whirred as it focused. "Didn't hear that question," he said, suddenly busy rearranging merchandise. "And if I were you, I wouldn't be asking it again. Not if you want to keep breathing unpolluted air." Kale nodded. understanding the warning. The syndicate's influence reached far, even here. He gathered his purchases and melted back into the crowd. In a secluded alcove, he meticulously prepped his equipment, muscle memory taking over as he checked and rechecked each piece. The familiarity of it brought a grim comfort. He'd done this hundreds of times before deployments. Different mission, same routine. Except this time, there was no squad backing him up. No extraction plan. Just one former soldier against what was likely a well-armed criminal organization. And a pair of haunting, crystalline eyes that wouldn't let him walk away. Night cycle was beginning on the station, the artificial lighting dimming to simulate dusk. Cale made his way back toward the maintenance tunnels, moving now with practiced stealth. He'd memorized the route and mapped the most likely guard positions based on his earlier observation. The first guard fell without a sound, a precise strike to the nerve cluster at the base of his skull dropping him into unconsciousness. Cale dragged the body into a utility closet, securing him with the stasis cuffs before moving on. The second and third guards were positioned at the entrance to the makeshift facility. Cale waited in the shadows, timing their patrol pattern, then rolled a stun grenade between them. He looked away as the flashbang detonated, leaving the guards disoriented. Two quick, precise strikes, and they joined their comrade in unconsciousness. Inside, he found the chamber where the crystalline woman was being held. The room was dimmer now, operating with a skeleton crew, just a single technician monitoring the equipment, and no sign of the warden. Cale slipped behind the technician, covering his mouth while pressing the ion blaster to his temple. "Don't make a sound," he whispered, "and you get to keep breathing. Not if you understand." The technician nodded frantically. "The crystalline. How do I release her?" "Why you can't," the technician stammered. "The systems are locked. Only Warden Vorg has the authorization codes." Cale pressed the blaster harder against the man's head. "Try again. I'm serious. Look, the main extraction unit is controlled from that console, but it needs biometric confirmation from Vorg or a remote authorization from Director Silas. If you try to break in, it'll trigger a security lockdown and probably kill her in the process." Cale considered this, eyes darting between the console and the chamber where the crystalline woman hung motionless, only the faint rise and fall of her chest indicating she still lived. "If I was going to bypass it, hypothetically," the technician swallowed, You'd have to cause a power surge to reset the emergency systems, then override the safety protocols. But it would set off alarms across half the station." "That's a risk I'll have to take," Cale said, then struck the technician at the base of the skull, catching his unconscious body and lowering it to the floor. Moving quickly to the console, he examined the complex array of controls. Military tech specialists had been part of his unit. He'd picked up enough to be dangerous, if not exactly proficient. Spotting the main power conduit, he attached one of his signal scramblers, modified to generate an electromagnetic pulse when activated. Before triggering it, he approached the chamber itself, placing a hand on the transparent material. Up close, the crystalline woman looked even worse. Her skin was ashen, the crystalline formations dull and lifeless. Dark circles shadowed her closed eyes, and the electrodes attached to her body had left angry marks where they pierced her skin. "I'm getting you out of here," he murmured, though he doubted she could hear him. "Just hold on." Returning to the console, Cale activated the EMP device and ducked behind a bulkhead. The pulse shot through the system with a shower of sparks, and for a heart-stopping moment, everything went dark. Then emergency lights kicked on, bathing the room in an eerie red glow. As predicted, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Working quickly, Cale used his multi-tool to access the now rebooting system, bypassing the safety protocols that prevented emergency release of the chamber. With a hiss of escaping pressure, the transparent walls slid open, and the restraints holding the crystalline woman released all at once. She collapsed like a marionette with cut strings. Cale lunged forward, catching her before she hit the ground. Her body was unnaturally light in his arms and cold. Not the chill of death, but something more akin to the cool touch of actual crystal. The formations on her skin scraped lightly against his arms as he lifted her. Her eyes fluttered open briefly, those strange violet irises hazy with confusion and pain. She murmured something in a language he didn't understand, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "I don't understand, but we need to move," Kale said, adjusting his hold to support her more securely. "This place is about to get very crowded." As if on cue, the sound of booted feet echoed from the corridor outside. Kale hefted the crystalline woman over his shoulder in a fireman's carry, freeing one hand for his weapon, and headed for the secondary exit he'd identified during his reconnaissance. They barely made it through the doorway before the first guards burst into the facility behind them, shouting in alarm at the sight of the empty chamber. Kale moved as quickly as he dared through the dimly lit service tunnels, the woman's slight weight hardly slowing him. Each intersection required a split-second decision, his mental map guiding him through the labyrinthine underbelly of the station. A shout from behind confirmed they were being pursued. Kale ducked into a narrow maintenance shaft, barely wide enough for his shoulders, hoping to lose their pursuers in the station's industrial sector. The crystalline woman stirred against him, making a soft sound of distress. One of her hands weakly grasped at his jacket. "Stay with me," he urged, emerging from the shaft into a larger corridor. Just a little further. The sound of their pursuers had faded, but Kale knew better than to slow down. The syndicate would have eyes all over the station by now. They needed to get somewhere safe and fast. 3 levels up and 2 sectors over, Kale finally reached his destination, a nondescript door in a residential area populated mainly by station workers. He input a code, and the door slid open to reveal a small, spartanly furnished apartment. Called in a favor, he explained to the barely conscious woman as he carefully laid her on the narrow bed. "We should be safe here for a while." He quickly secured the door, activating the additional security measures he'd installed earlier. Only then did he turn his full attention to his rescue. The crystalline woman lay motionless on the bed, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Up close and in better light, Kale could see that what he'd taken for skin was actually a smooth, almost translucent dermis with a subtle blue tint. The crystalline formations, primarily on her shoulders, forearms, and along her collarbones, were actually growing from beneath this outer layer, as if part of her skeletal structure had transformed into gemstone. Her features were humanoid, but undeniably alien. High cheekbones, a slightly elongated face, and those extraordinary eyes, now closed. Her hair, if it could be called that, was a crown of fine, filament-like strands that resembled fiber optic cables more than actual hair, glowing faintly at the roots with an internal light that seemed to pulse in time with her breathing. Kale retrieved the medical supplies he'd purchased and set about treating her visible injuries. The puncture wounds where electrodes had been attached were his primary concern. They oozed a strange, luminescent fluid that he suspected was her species' equivalent of blood. As he worked, the woman's eyes suddenly flew open, startling him. She recoiled in fear, scrambling weakly against the wall, crystalline formations flaring with a dim light. She spoke rapidly in her chiming language, the words incomprehensible, but the fear behind them universal. Kale raised his hands, palms out. "Easy," he said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you. You're safe." Her eyes, wide with panic, darted around the small room before settling back on him. She spoke again, more slowly this time, then seemed to realize he couldn't understand. After a moment's hesitation, she touched one of the crystals on her forearm, which glowed slightly brighter. When she spoke again, her words were halting but recognizable. "Who? You? Why? Take me. My name is Kale," he answered, keeping his distance to avoid frightening her further. "I saw what they were doing to you. I couldn't just leave you there." She stared at him for a long moment, as if assessing the truth of his words. Finally, she slumped slightly, the glow from her crystals dimming. "Alara," she said, touching her chest. "I am Alara." She winced suddenly, arm wrapping protectively around her midsection. "Weak. They took much energy." Kale nodded, gesturing to the medical supplies. "I want to help. Those wounds need treatment." Alara regarded the supplies warily, then gave a slight nod. Kale approached slowly, resuming his treatment of the electrode punctures. Up close, he noticed how the luminescence of her blood seemed to have dimmed, further evidence of her depleted state. Water, he offered, reaching for a container. But do you need something else? Light, she said weakly. Need? Light. Kale increased the room's illumination to maximum, but Alara shook her head. Natural light. Starlight. Best. She touched one of her crystals. We absorb. Transform is how we live. Understanding dawned. You're photosynthetic? You convert light to energy. She nodded wearily. Simple words, but yes. Crystalline bodies. Transform light to living energy. Her expression darkened. Syndicate discovered. Our energy can power their machines. Weapons. Ships. She closed her eyes briefly. They hunt us now. Kale's jaw tightened. How many of your people have they taken? Many, Alara whispered. I was not first, not last. Colony ship was attacked. Some escaped. Others, she didn't need to finish. Kale sat back, processing this information. The Syndicate was harvesting sentient beings as living batteries. The thought made his stomach turn. Rest, he told her. You're safe for now. Tomorrow I'll figure out how to get you someplace with natural light. Alara nodded weakly, her eyes already drifting closed. Just before sleep claimed her, she reached out, her cool fingers brushing against his wrist. Why help? She asked, genuine puzzlement in her voice. No profit. Much danger. Kale didn't have a ready answer. The cynical shell he'd built over years of seeing the worst the galaxy had to offer had no rational explanation for his actions today. Eventually, he simply said, because it was right. Her lips curved in what might have been a smile as she drifted into unconsciousness. Kale remained sitting beside her, contemplating their next move while the station's alarms continued to wail in the distance. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Alara slept for nearly 14 standard hours. Kale used the time to monitor station communications, gleaning what information he could about the Syndicate's response to their escaped asset. The news wasn't good. Security had been doubled at all docking bays, and search teams were methodically working through the residential sectors. It was only a matter of time before they reached this hideout. Kale was checking his weapons when Alara finally stirred. She looked marginally better. Her skin had regained some of its blue luster, and the crystalline formations appeared slightly more translucent than before. Still, she was clearly weak, moving with deliberate care as she sat up. How long? She asked, voice steadier than before. About 14 hours, Kale replied, offering her water, which she accepted gratefully. How do you feel? Depleted, she said after drinking. But functioning. She looked around the small room with more awareness than before. Your dwelling? Temporary safe house, he corrected, and not safe for much longer. The Syndicate is searching the station. We need to move soon. Alara nodded, her expression somber. They will not stop. The energy they took from me, very valuable, powers weapons that should not exist. Tell me about them, Kale said, sitting across from her. Everything you know could help us. Alara closed her eyes briefly, organizing her thoughts. When she spoke again, her command of the common language seemed improved, perhaps due to her partial recovery. The Syndicate found our colony vessel 3 lunar cycles ago. We were traveling to join an established settlement on Proxima 4. Our kind, the crystalline, we are not numerous. Perhaps 10,000 in this galaxy. She touched one of the formations on her collarbone, which glimmered faintly in response. Our bodies absorb light energy and convert it to what you might call bioenergy. It is how we live, how we heal, how we power our modest technology. For us, it is simply life. But to others, she trailed off, her expression grim. The Syndicate discovered that our energy can be harvested and stored. It is exceptionally potent and stable, orders of magnitude beyond conventional power sources. One crystalline, properly processed, can power a military-grade battlecruiser for months. Kale's brow furrowed. Is the process fatal? Eventually, yes, Alara said quietly. They drain us to a point of near death, allow minimal recovery, then drain again. After 3 or 4 such cycles, there is Nothing left to recover. We become like ordinary crystal. Inert. The clinical way she described her people's execution made Kale's anger burn hotter. And this director Silas is in charge of the operation? Alara nodded. I never saw him, but the warden spoke of him often. He directs all crystalline acquisition and processing in this sector. The energy is shipped to other syndicate facilities for weaponization. She looked down at her hands, which trembled slightly. I was to be completely drained today. My final cycle. Her eyes met Kale's. You saved more than my freedom. You saved my life. There was a weight to her gratitude that made Kale uncomfortable. He'd spent too many years convinced that nothing he did made a difference in the vast indifference of the universe. Now, faced with the tangible result of his intervention, he didn't quite know how to respond. We're not safe yet, he said instead, checking the time. We need to get off this station, but every docking bay is crawling with syndicate enforcers. And you need sunlight, real sunlight, to recover properly. There is more, Alara said, her voice taking on a new urgency. When they examined me, I learned things, fragments from their communications, data I glimpsed on their screens. The syndicate has a primary processing facility on this station, a place where they're holding others of my kind. This was new information. Kale had assumed the makeshift lab was the extent of the syndicate's operation on Vesper. How many, he asked. I cannot be certain. Perhaps a dozen. And they're building something, a device that would extract and focus multiple crystallines energy simultaneously. A weapon of immense power. Kale paced the small room, mind racing. So we can't just escape. Not if they're holding more of your people and building some kind of superweapon. Alara watched him, a strange expression crossing her features. You would help them also? Strangers to you? This isn't just about your people anymore, Kale replied. A weapon that powerful in the hands of the syndicate threatens everyone. He paused, meeting her gaze. Directly. But yes, I'd help them anyway. No one deserves to be used like that. Something changed in Alara's expression then, a softening, a warmth that hadn't been there before. She rose from the bed, moving with more steadiness, and approached him. Without warning, she placed her hand over his heart. The contact sent a strange sensation through him. Not unpleasant, but alien, like a gentle electrical current humming just beneath his skin. Remarkable, she murmured, genuine wonder in her voice. You have resonance. Kale remained still, uncertain what was happening. Meaning, your life energy, what you might call a soul, it vibrates at a frequency compatible with crystalline energy. It is rare among non-crystallines. She withdrew her hand, but the sensation lingered. It explains why I could connect with you when we first met, even in my weakened state. Why you felt compelled to help me. I don't believe in mystical connections, Kale said, uncomfortable with the implication that his choice had been somehow predetermined. Alara smiled slightly. It is not mystical. It is science your species has not yet discovered. Her expression became more serious. But may help us. With your resonance, you could amplify my remaining energy. Together, we might be strong enough to free the others. How would that work? Kale asked, intrigued despite his skepticism. Physical proximity strengthens the resonance. In my weakened state, I can do little, but with you near, I could potentially access more of my abilities. She hesitated. It requires trust, a lowering of natural barriers. Kale considered this. The tactical part of his mind recognized the potential advantage such abilities might provide. The suspicious part wondered if this was some form of manipulation. But when he looked into Alara's eyes, those crystalline depths that had first compelled him to action, he saw only sincerity. We'll try it, he decided. But first, we need a plan and more information. We can't just storm the main facility. Alara nodded, relief evident in her expression. I can help with that. The processing facility is in the industrial sector, disguised as a power substation. I saw its location in the warden's files. Good, that's a start. Kale retrieved a datapad from his equipment. But we need to know their security protocols, guard rotations, access points. A sharp knock at the door cut him off mid-sentence. Both froze, exchanging alarmed glances. The knock came again, followed by a familiar voice. Kale, open up. It's Mira, and you'd better have a damn good explanation. Kale motioned for Alara to move behind him as he approached the door, blaster ready. He activated the viewer and confirmed it was indeed the bartender, apparently alone. What do you want, Mira? He called through the door. To save your suicidal ass, she replied tersely. The entire station is looking for you and your stolen property. Let me in before someone notices me standing here. After a moment's hesitation, Kale unlocked the door. Mira slipped inside, her augmented eyes immediately locking onto Alara. So it's true, she murmured, taking in the crystalline woman's alien appearance. You really did steal from the syndicate. She turned to Kale, expression a mix of anger and disbelief. Do you have any idea what you've done? They're tearing the station apart, looking for you too. There's a bounty that would buy a small moon. She's not property, Kale said firmly. The syndicate is using her people as living batteries, torturing them to death for their energy. Mira looked between them, her cybernetic eyes whirring as they adjusted focus. Finally, she sighed heavily. I should turn you both in and collect that bounty, she said. Then, with a resigned shake of her head, but I suppose I've always had terrible business sense. She produced a small data drive from her pocket. Station security plans, including the industrial sector. Updated guard rotations. Emergency protocols. At Kale's surprised expression, she added, I have my sources, and I pay attention when a military-grade power substation appears overnight in a section that barely needs lighting. Kale accepted the drive, genuine gratitude in his voice. Thank you, Mira. Don't thank me yet, she replied grimly. You've got maybe 6 hours before they reach this sector in their search pattern. Whatever you're planning, do it fast. She glanced at Alara. And whatever she is, I hope she's worth it. After Mira left, Kale inserted the data drive into his pad and began studying the information. Alara moved to his side, close enough that he could feel that strange resonance between them, stronger now, as if their shared purpose had somehow intensified the connection. Your friend risked much, Alara observed. Myra's not my friend, Kale replied automatically, then paused. But yes, she did. They spent the next hour analyzing the security plans, formulating a strategy that balanced their limited resources against the facility's defenses. The plan was risky at best, suicidal at worst, but neither could see an alternative. There's something else we should try before we go, Alara said when they had finalized their approach. The resonance. If we are to have any chance against their security forces, I will need more strength than I currently possess. Kale nodded, setting aside the datapad. What do we do? Sit, she instructed, settling on the floor in a cross-legged position. Kale mirrored her, their knees almost touching. Now, give me your hands. He extended his hands, and she took them in hers. Her touch was cool, but not cold, with a curious smoothness unlike human skin. The crystalline formations on her wrists glimmered faintly. Close your eyes, she said softly. Try to clear your mind. Focus only on the point where we connect. Kale complied, though quieting his thoughts proved challenging. Years of combat training had conditioned him to remain constantly alert, mind always evaluating threats and escape routes. Your mind is like a weapon that never powers down, Alara observed, a smile in her voice. Try to let go. Trust that for this moment. You are safe. Kale made a conscious effort to relax, to focus on the sensation of her hands in his. Gradually, the resonance Alara had described became more pronounced, a humming energy that seemed to flow between them, gathering strength as it circulated. Yes, Alara whispered. Can you feel it? He could. It was like nothing he'd experienced before, a connection that went beyond physical touch, beyond ordinary consciousness. He felt simultaneously more aware of himself and more attuned to Alara, as if the boundaries between them had become permeable. The crystals on Alara's body began to glow more brightly, their light pulsing in a rhythm that matched the energy flowing between them. Kale felt a curious warmth spreading through him, not unpleasant but foreign, as if his body were being temporarily reconfigured to channel something it wasn't designed for. Alara's breath caught, and her eyes flew open, now luminous with an inner light that made the violet irises look like actual amethysts. "Extraordinary," she breathed. "Your resonance is stronger than I expected." The connection between them intensified to the point where Kale could almost see the energy, a luminous current flowing from him to Alara, being transformed within her crystalline body, then returning to him, changed and amplified. Suddenly, Alara gasped, and one of the crystals on her forearm flared with brilliant light. The wound beneath it, where an electrode had pierced her skin, sealed itself before Kale's astonished eyes. "That's never happened before," she said, wonder in her voice. "The resonance is healing me." Over the next several minutes, the remaining wounds closed one by one, the crystalline formations regaining their translucent luster. Color returned to Alara's skin, a healthier blue that seemed to glow from within. Even her filament-like hair began to shimmer with renewed vibrancy. When they finally broke contact, Kale felt oddly depleted but not weakened, as if he'd exercised muscles he didn't know he possessed. "How do you feel?" he asked, watching as Alara rose to her feet with newfound grace. "Restored," she replied, examining her healed skin with wonder. "Not completely, but far better than I could have hoped." She met his gaze, her eyes still glowing faintly. "Thank you, Kale. Your resonance has given me strength when I needed it most." He stood as well, checking the time. "We should move soon. The search teams will reach this sector in a few hours." Alara nodded, a new determination in her stance. "I am ready." Kale gathered his weapons and equipment, securing them efficiently about his person. "Remember the plan. We get in, locate the other crystallants, sabotage their weapon, and get out. No heroics, no delays. And if we encounter Warden Vord, or worse, Director Silas?" Kale checked his ion blaster, his expression hardening. "Then they'll learn what happens when you turn people into batteries." They slipped out of the safe house during the station's artificial dusk, when shift changes and dimmed lighting provided optimal cover. Using the service tunnels and maintenance shafts, they made their way toward the industrial sector, avoiding the main thoroughfares where syndicate search teams were concentrated. Twice they were forced to hide as patrols passed nearby. Pressed into shadowed alcoves, Alara's crystalline body carefully concealed against Kale's darker clothing. The resonance between them seemed to intensify during these moments of proximity, a silent communication that required no words. The industrial sector was a maze of towering machinery, hissing pipes, and clanking conveyor systems that processed raw materials from incoming freight ships. Few station personnel ventured here without specific purpose. The air was acrid, with chemical processing and the ambient noise deafening. Perfect cover for illicit operations. According to Myra's intelligence, the syndicate's main facility was disguised as Power Substation 37B, a nondescript structure ostensibly providing auxiliary power to the manufacturing plants in this sector. The real giveaway was the security, far heavier than any legitimate substation would require. From their vantage point behind a massive atmospheric filter, Kale counted 6 guards at the main entrance alone, with sensor arrays and automated defense turrets covering all obvious approaches. "Front door's not an option," he murmured, studying the schematic on his datapad. "But there's a maintenance access here, for emergency repairs to the cooling system." He indicated a point near the base of the structure. "Minimal security, since it's barely large enough for maintenance drones." "I can fit," Alara said, eyeing the distant access point. "My body structure is more flexible than it appears." Kale shook his head. "We go together or not at all. I'm not sending you in there alone." Her expression softened momentarily, but she didn't argue. Instead, she pointed to a section of the schematic. "The primary containment area should be here based on what I glimpsed in their files. If they're holding my people, that's where they'll be. And this superweapon they're building, likely adjacent. The energy transfer would need to be immediate and direct." Kale nodded, committing the layout to memory before powering down the datapad. "Let's move. Stay close." They circled the perimeter of the substation, using the massive industrial machinery for cover. The maintenance access was indeed small, a circular hatch barely a meter in diameter, designed for robotic service units rather than humanoids. "You first," Kale said after disabling the simple alarm system. "I'll be right behind you." Alara nodded, then surprised him by taking his hand briefly. A small pulse of energy passed between them, like a farewell or good luck charm. Then she slipped through the hatch with a fluid grace that reminded him she was far from human despite her humanoid appearance. Kale followed with considerably more difficulty, his broader frame barely squeezing through the opening. Inside was a narrow service tunnel, dimly lit by maintenance lights. The air was hot and stale, laden with the ozone smell of overtaxed electrical systems. They crawled forward on hands and knees, following the tunnel's course deeper into the facility. After about 30 meters, Alara stopped abruptly, her crystalline formations suddenly pulsing with a faint light. "What is it?" Kale whispered. "I can sense them," she replied, her voice tight with emotion. "My people. They're close." She pressed one hand against the tunnel wall, and in pain, Kale squeezed her shoulder reassuringly. "We'll get them out. All of them." They continued forward until the tunnel opened into a small maintenance junction. From here, several larger ducts branched off in different directions. Kale consulted his mental map of the facility. "That way should lead toward the containment area," he said, pointing to a duct on their right. They had progressed perhaps another 50 meters when Alara suddenly gasped, her whole body tensing. The crystalline formations on her skin flared briefly with light before she managed to suppress it. "What's wrong?" Kale asked, alarmed. "They're—" Her voice broke. "They're extracting now. I can feel it. The pain." She shuddered, hands pressed against her temples as if trying to block out the sensation. Kale faced a tactical decision: maintain stealth and proceed cautiously, or move quickly to stop the immediate suffering. One look at Alara's agonized expression made the choice clear. "Change of plan," he said grimly. "We end this now." They moved faster through the duct system, no longer prioritizing silence over speed. At a junction that Kale believed would open near the containment area, he paused long enough to prepare a stun grenade, then kicked out the vent cover. The grenade rolled into the room beyond, detonating with a blinding flash and concussive wave. Kale dropped through the opening, ion blaster ready, Alara right behind him. They found themselves in a vast chamber dominated by transparent cells similar to the one that had held Alara, but larger, much larger. Each contained not one but 2 or 3 crystallines, their bodies interconnected by a grotesque network of cables and electrodes that forced them to stand in formation, like components in a circuit board. Around the perimeter, syndicate technicians worked at control stations, monitoring the energy extraction. Several had been incapacitated by the stun grenade, but others were already recovering, reaching for alarm controls or weapons. Kale fired precisely, dropping 3 technicians before they could respond. A 4th managed to activate an alarm, sending a wailing siren through the facility before Kale's next shot rendered him unconscious. "Free them," he shouted to Alara, taking up a defensive position near the main entrance. "I'll hold them off." Alara rushed to the nearest control console, her fingers flying over the unfamiliar controls with surprising dexterity. The crystalline formations on her hands glowed intensely as she worked, seeming to interface directly with the system in some way Kale didn't understand. One by one, the extraction chambers powered down, their transparent walls retracting. The imprisoned crystallines collapsed, too weak to stand on their own after prolonged energy drainage. The facility doors burst open, admitting a squad of syndicate guards armed with plasma rifles. Kale fired, forcing them back momentarily, but they quickly regrouped, returning fire with coordinated precision. "Alara," he called, ducking behind a console as plasma bolts seared the air above him. "How much longer?" "Almost done," she replied, her voice strained. "But my people cannot walk. They're too weak." Kale risked a glance around his cover. The freed crystallines lay where they had fallen, their crystalline formations dull and lifeless, bodies barely moving. There were at least a dozen of them, far too many to carry. "We need a new plan," he muttered, firing again to keep the guards at bay. His blaster's charge indicator was already dropping to dangerous levels. Suddenly, a new voice cut through the chaos. Cold, imperious, and immediately commanding attention. "Stand down, all of you." The guards immediately ceased fire, stepping aside to admit a tall, elegantly dressed human male. His silver hair was immaculately styled, his posture rigid with authority. But it was his eyes that captured attention, pale blue and utterly devoid of empathy, like a predator assessing prey. "Director Silas," Alara whispered, recognizing him instantly despite never having seen him before. The director surveyed the scene with clinical detachment, his gaze finally settling on Kale. "You've cost me a considerable investment," he said, his voice deceptively soft. "But I'm willing to be reasonable. Surrender now, and your death will be quick." The alien goes back into processing. Kale remained in cover, blaster ready. "Not happening, Silas. What you're doing here isn't just criminal, it's an atrocity." Silas sighed, as if disappointed by a child's poor performance. "Crime? Atrocity? Such quaint moral concepts." He gestured toward the weakened crystallines. "These creatures are a resource, nothing more. A phenomenally valuable resource that will revolutionize energy weapons technology." His eyes gleamed with cold passion. "Do you have any idea what crystalline energy can do when properly harnessed? The prototype alone can destroy a capital ship with a single discharge." "You're insane," Kale said flatly. "I'm a visionary," Silas corrected, "and I will not allow some washed-up soldier with misplaced sentimentality to interfere with progress." He turned to his guards. "Take them. The human is expendable. The crystalline female is to be returned to processing immediately." The guards advanced, weapons trained on Kale's position. He checked his blaster's charge, nearly depleted. Not enough to take out all the guards, certainly not enough to deal with whatever personal protection Silas himself might have. Then he felt it, a pulse of energy so strong it seemed to vibrate in his bones. Turning, he saw Alara standing amid her fallen people, her crystalline formations blazing with light. The resonance between them surged, and somehow Kale knew what she intended. "Cover your eyes," he shouted, ducking down and shielding his face with his arm. The chamber exploded with blindingly brilliant light as Alara released a massive energy pulse. The syndicate guards cried out in pain and confusion, temporarily blinded. Silas staggered back, arm raised protectively before his face. In that moment of confusion, Kale sprinted to Alara's side. "What are you doing?" he hissed. "Sharing strength," she replied, her voice strained but determined. Her hands were outstretched toward her fallen people, the energy flowing visibly from her to them, creating a network of luminous connections. "The resonance we share, I'm channeling it to revive them." Before Kale's astonished eyes, the other crystallines began to stir, their formations gradually regaining luminosity. They were drawing on Alara's energy, and by extension, the resonant energy she shared with Kale. "You'll drain yourself completely," he warned, supporting her as she swayed. "No choice," she gasped. "Must. Free them. Must stop. The weapon. The weapon." In the chaos, Kale had almost forgotten Silas's prototype. He scanned the chamber, spotting a massive apparatus at the far end, a towering construct of metal and crystal that hummed with ominous power. At its core was a receptacle clearly designed to hold crystallines in a specific formation, forcibly extracting and focusing their energy into a concentrated beam. "Director, they're going for the prototype," one of the guards shouted, his vision apparently recovering. Silas's voice cut through the confusion with cold fury. "Stop them at all costs. Activate emergency protocols." A new alarm sounded, different from the intruder alert. More urgent, more ominous. Red warning lights began to flash throughout the chamber. "What's happening?" Kale demanded. One of the reviving crystallines, an elder male with elaborate formations across his chest, spoke in a weak but clear voice. "Self-destruct sequence. They would rather destroy the facility than lose the prototype." "How long?" "Minutes at most," the elder replied. Kale made a split-second decision. "Alara, Can your people move now? She nodded, though her light had dimmed considerably from the energy she'd shared. Barely, but yes. Get them to the emergency evacuation pods. There should be a bay near the main power core, according to the schematics. He handed her his datapad. I'll deal with the prototype and meet you there. No, Alara protested. It's too dangerous to separate. There's no time to argue, Kale insisted. That weapon can't be allowed to survive, and your people need you to guide them. The elder crystalline placed a hand on Alara's arm. He's right, Alara. Our people are the priority. After a moment's agonized hesitation, Alara nodded. But before turning to lead her people, she grasped Kale's hand, sending a powerful surge of energy through their connection, a final gift of strength. Return to me, she said simply, then turned away, guiding the weakened crystallines toward the evacuation route, while Kale's covering fire kept the partially recovered guards at bay. Once they were clear, Kale turned his attention to the prototype weapon. The control systems were complex, but the principle was clear enough. Overload the power core, and the whole thing would melt down. Simple in theory, challenging in execution. He was halfway through the sequence when a cold voice spoke from behind him. Step away from the prototype. Kale turned to find himself facing Director Silas, who held a sleek, advanced pistol aimed precisely at Kale's head. All this trouble over some alien batteries, Silas said, his contempt evident. Do you have any idea of the value of what you're attempting to destroy? The power it represents? I know exactly what it represents, Kale replied, continuing to work on the overload sequence behind his back. Suffering, slavery, death. Silas scoffed. Such noble sentiments from a man with your history. Oh yes, I know who you are, Kale Davros. Former Special Operations, discharged under questionable circumstances after the Altair incident. A cold smile played across his lips. Did you think destroying my facility would somehow atone for the colonists who died under your command? The words struck like physical blows, but Kale kept his expression neutral. This isn't about me, isn't it? Always the savior, rushing in to rescue the helpless aliens. Tell me, does it ease your conscience when you sleep at night? Silas took a step closer, his weapon unwavering. You couldn't save those colonists, and you won't save these creatures. The Syndicate's reach extends beyond this station. We'll find them again. We'll find her again. Kale's fingers found the final sequence key. Not if you're too busy dealing with this. He hit the command, then dove sideways as Silas fired. The energy bolt missed him by centimeters, scorching the console. The prototype's core immediately began to pulse with an unstable light, alarms shrieking as safeguards failed one after another. You fool, Silas snarled, firing again as Kale rolled behind a structural column. You've doomed us all. Only if you stay here, Kale called back, making a break for the exit. I suggest you run. He didn't look back to see if Silas followed his advice. The corridor ahead was chaos. Syndicate personnel fleeing in all directions as the self-destruct countdown continued. Kale pushed through them, focused solely on reaching the evacuation bay, where Alara and her people should be waiting. The bay was a scene of desperate activity when he arrived, with the last station personnel cramming into escape pods. Of Alara and the crystallines, there was no sign. Alara, he shouted over the alarms, searching frantically among the crowd. Kale! Her voice reached him from across the bay, where she stood beside an open pod. The other crystallines were already inside, their weakened forms barely visible in the cramped space. He fought his way to her side. It's done. The prototype is overloading, and it'll take the whole facility with it. He gestured to the pod. Get in. There's not much time. What about you? She asked, though she already knew the answer. Kale glanced around. Every other pod was already full or launching. I'll find another way out. There are maintenance vessels, emergency, shuttles. No, Alara's tone was firm. You will not sacrifice yourself. Not for us. She turned to her people in the pod, speaking rapidly in their chiming language. After a brief exchange, she faced Kale again. There is room for one more if we compress our forms. It is a skill of our people. Before he could protest, she pulled him into the pod. True to her word, The crystallines shifted, their bodies seeming to become more crystalline and less humanoid, taking up significantly less space, though clearly at some discomfort to themselves. This is dangerous for them in their weakened state, Kale objected. More dangerous than being left behind. Alara countered, sealing the pod. We survived together or not at all. The pod launched with a violent jolt, ejecting from the station and immediately accelerating away on autopilot. Through the small viewport, they watched as explosions began to bloom from the industrial sector of Vesper Station. First small flares, then a massive eruption of light and energy as the prototype weapons core finally breached. The Syndicate will not recover from this loss easily, the elder crystalline observed, his voice weak but satisfied. Director Silas's weapon program was their most ambitious project. And their most terrible, Alara added softly. Kale remained silent, watching the station recede. He'd spent years drifting from place to place, carrying the weight of his failures, avoiding connections that might lead to more pain. Now, crammed into an escape pod with beings he barely knew, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time. Purpose, and perhaps the first fragile tendrils of belonging. The pod's automated systems had set a course for the nearest safe haven, a small trading outpost orbiting a yellow dwarf star. Not ideal for long-term safety, but the system's light would help the crystallines recover their strength. As if reading his thoughts, Alara placed her hand over his. The resonance between them hummed with renewed clarity, a warmth that spread through his chest. You wonder what comes next, she said. Not a question, but an observation. I haven't thought that far ahead, he admitted. Getting off the station alive seemed ambitious enough. The elder crystalline, who had introduced himself as Talon, spoke up. Our sanctuary colony on Proxima 4 will welcome you, Kale Davros. Few non-crystallines have earned such trust. I haven't decided where I'm going yet, Kale replied, avoiding Alara's gaze. But you will come with us first, she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. You need healing as much as we do, though your wounds are not visible. Kale started to protest, then stopped himself. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps the resonance between them had revealed truths about himself he wasn't ready to face. The guilt, the isolation, the belief that he deserved neither peace nor connection. For a while, he conceded, until I know you're safe. Alara's crystalline formations glowed subtly, reflecting what might have been a smile. The universe has strange patterns, Kale. Of all the beings who might have found me in that chamber, it was one whose energy harmonizes with my own. She released his hand, but maintained his gaze. I do not believe that is coincidence. I don't believe in destiny, Kale replied automatically. Nor do I, she said. I believe in choices, in moments that shape us, in connections that transform us. Her voice softened, and in the possibility of healing, even for those who believe themselves beyond it. The pod continued its journey through the star-flecked void, carrying its unlikely passengers toward an uncertain future. But as Kale looked at Alara, this alien being who had somehow reached past his carefully constructed defenses, he felt something he had long thought impossible. Hope, fragile but persistent, like starlight penetrating darkness. Behind them, the remnants of Vesper Station burned, the Syndicate's plans reduced to floating debris. They had made the aliens regret their cruelty, struck a blow against exploitation and suffering. It wasn't the redemption Kale had never sought, nor an absolution for past failures, but perhaps it was a beginning. And for now, that was enough.